Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of On the Water. How many times have I thought about shipwrecks and gold and seen the Atocha gold and silver bullion that we've seen so many times on television and thought, well, that's sunken treasure. Well, we're here tonight to tell you about another kind of treasure that's sunken treasure that is in some ways even more valuable, maybe not monetarily, although in the case of the figurines you see here, they certainly are extremely valuable, but from a historical standpoint. Tonight's guests, Tim Brody from Historic Sites and Shipwrecks, and Benny Fisher from Fisher Auctions. Good evening.
Evening. Good evening.
Tim, could you start off and first of all tell me a little bit about Historic Sites and Shipwrecks before we get into the specific site we're going to talk about?
All right. Historic Sites and Shipwrecks we incorporated in 1993. I have a partner in the Bahamas. We were working on looking for shipwrecks, but basically we had wanted to start a youthful education program for youthful offenders. That was the whole idea. When we found the Baltic and recovered the treasure from the Baltic, I thought at the time that if we auctioned off a portion of the treasure and used those funds to help fund the educational program for the kids.
So this is not only a process of discovering a shipwreck, but also you're working with youth offenders and trying to get some programs going there.
Yes, we're developing a youthful offenders educational rehabilitation program. We're trying to work with the 17th Judicial Circuit Court.
You're tying in two of my favorite things to do, be on the water and help the kids out, and that's really great. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the Baltic. What kind of a ship was it, and how did it end up where it did?
The Baltic was a brig. She was built in Camden, Maine in 1854, and it was owned by William H. Hooper. In 1866, just after the Civil War had ended, the Baltic sailed to England, France, and Germany, loaded up with porcelains, medicines, medical supplies, medical instruments, and things of that nature. Came back to the U.S., stopped and cleared customs in New York City, where she also loaded on some American porcelains, headed for Galveston, Texas. And when she got out around the Bahamas, she got caught in the Great Hurricane of 1866, which was a very bad hurricane. They lost over 2,000 people in that particular hurricane. Baltic's captain ran her over the reef and hauled her. I think he was trying to save his crew and beach the ship. She was sunk in shallow water, and we think she was covered with sand probably in the first 8 hours of the storm, because when we found her, she was fully intact. The straw and everything was still in the barrels and the crates, and all the pieces were virtually intact on her.
Yeah, I've seen some of the video shots that you made during the recovery, and it was absolutely amazing that almost as soon as they went down and found the ship, they blew the sand off, and there was basically an entire ship and almost the entire cargo. Am I right on that?
Fully intact ship, fully intact cargo, except for we've got a missing 16 tons that was on the upper deck. The upper deck was washed off, and that was just barrels of porcelain that were strapped on the upper deck, and we believe that they lay between where the ship is today and the beach, because they did recover 2 barrels on the beach at the time and took them into Nassau. They were in a broken condition at the time.
But from what I've seen, the condition of the pieces that you have and you recovered are almost perfect, and we have 2 of them here, and we're looking at them right now, and they are absolutely perfect, and that is the condition of most of the pieces you have.
Every piece that we've brought up virtually is in this kind of pristine condition. This is an inkwell. Inside they have the container for the ink, and also the container for the sand. And we have 3 numbered pieces which we've traced to they were commissioned by the King of Bavaria in 1758. He sold all his patents and molds and everything to a fellow called Edward Kick, who started producing in 1850. And from what we've been able to track down, that is how they came to be aboard the Baltic.
Well, without a doubt, they're beautiful and they're very old. That means they're very valuable. So, Benny, tell me a little bit maybe about what your assessment of some of these pieces is. I know that you have a tremendous amount of expertise in this.
Thank you. I wish I could guesstimate the value, but and I have a lot of experience. I've sold a lot of antiquities over 30 years, 25 or 30 years of experience. But as we all have talked about, these having been virtually off the market for 130 years, because of their historicity, because of their condition, it's going to be a very exciting auction. Frankly, in my entire career, I don't believe that I've ever offered any antiques quite like these as to what the parameters of value may be. I've been asked that question innumerable times, but the pieces we're looking at now could range in price anywhere from a few $100s, say $1,500, up to $15,000 each, depending on those who attend the auction. And we think we'll have worldwide attention, frankly, to this event, and people flying in even from Europe to be in attendance.
You got me nervous now with the $15,000 worth of pieces here on my desk, and I won't get any closer than this, believe me. But you did mention an auction. Tim, I know that that there's more than one piece of this situation. The auction is for what?
The auction is to be held at the Broward Convention Center May the 17th, and it's to help us raise funds for the Youthful Education Rehabilitation Program, so that we can go on and develop a constant source of funding for these kids programs. And we hope to get the kids involved in our recovery work so that the kids will actually get a portion of what's raised off of some of these wrecks. We have 14 other wrecks in our lease. Our lease is 50 miles long by 30 miles wide. We have 14 that we've identified so far. We have 2 others that we've filmed besides the Baltic, which we're positive have porcelain on them as well. So we think over the next year we'll be bringing up other wrecks of this quality.
And I do know that there is more than local attention here, because you've been working with National Film, and we're going to see more about this coming up soon?
Yes, we had a company called Andrews Salt Productions in Los Angeles, California, did this for Discovery TV, and that will be showed sometime in May or June. They did a program on the Baltic recovery.
Well, I've had a sneak preview, and I want to tell you, it was absolutely amazing to see that ship in that shallow of a water and have pieces come off of it that were like this. I mean, that was just absolutely amazing. Why was this ship, lost for so long? It was right there all the time.
Virtually, you can stand waist deep in the water on the top of the Baltic. There's about a foot of her mast protruding above the sand. When you look under the water, it's just completely sandy beach under the water. There's no way that you would know it was there unless you magged it and got a mag reading on it.
That was absolutely amazing, because I could see the beach. You're right there. It's not like you're miles at sea. It's not like you're in a somewhere halfway around the world. I mean, the Baltic was right in front of us all the time, wasn't it?
All the time it was, yeah. There were a lot of stories. The old people in the Bahamas had talked about this particular wreck and a few other wrecks in the area. And my partner had tracked down that information, and that's how we started looking for the Baltic in that area. I think we've broken new ground, basically, and proven that a ship can still be virtually intact after 100 years, and there's possibly Spaniards down there that are virtually intact if they are buried in sand, and were buried in sand soon after they sunk. There's a gentleman I know in Florida with Florida Atlantic University that has developed a unit that can locate vessels, the wooden parts of vessels, through the air that's trapped in the wood. His name's Professor Stephen Schock, I believe.
Yeah, that was it was really interesting to see that, and I know that you've certainly set off a wave of interest of the local folks over there looking for other pieces of wood protruding above the sand there.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, one thing that happened, we had the mast actually after we uncovered it. It washed up on the beach, and some people found it, and they had a campfire on the beach and they burnt the mast. So we were quite disappointed about that.
I'm sure you were crestfallen when you found out about that.
We were.
But there are how many pieces and how many tons of pieces that you did recover?
We've only recovered about between 1/4 and 1/2 of the cargo. We still have a couple of tons of plate glass aboard her. She still has several barrels of porcelain behind the plate glass.
So the pieces that we see here are all from the recovery and some more to go.
Oh yes, there's much more to go. We'll probably be working the Baltic for another year to recover the rest.
And then you'll be moving to, you have, as you said
another
earlier,
ship.
you have other sites
Yeah.
already identified.
Yeah, we're hoping to be able to set up for the proper preservation of the Baltic and actually raise the whole ship and put it on a barge and take it somewhere where we can have people preserve the actual shipwreck itself.
And as time goes on, hopefully you'll your youthful, offenders program will be more tightly woven in through this, and we can get some of our young people an opportunity to work with you.
That's what we're hoping. We've spoken to people and we've been offered buildings here in Fort Lauderdale. We're trying to raise enough funds to set up a training facility for these young people and actually train them in these buildings and put 10 or 12 kids per vessel and have them actually work on site, be able to get their GED, and we have 14 different courses available, and people are willing to teach them in underwater photography, diving, that sort of thing.
That's great. We've got a couple of minutes here, but I do want to make sure that folks know when and where the auction is, because the more money that the auction raises, the more money goes to the kids, and that's where our heart is. So if you could once more tell us when and where the auction is and how do people get in touch with you.
The auction is at the Broward County Convention Center, May the 17th, which is a Saturday. There will be a viewing and sort of a cocktail party at 5 o'clock, and I believe the auction will start at 7. It's being held by the Fisher Auction Company of Pompano Beach, and they can call the Fisher Auction Company and speak to Mr. Benny Fisher for any additional information that they need.
Great.
About reserved seating and that sort of thing.
I want to thank you both for coming. It's been a real privilege to sit here. There is more money sitting on this desk than there is furnishings in my home, and my wife will tell you that. I assure you, this is absolutely beautiful. Mr. Fisher, I really appreciate you taking your time, because I know you're very busy, and I know that you're going to do a real good job, raising the money for the kids. And I'm sure we're going to see you around from time to time, Tim. We've seen you down at the museum a time or two before, but we do appreciate you coming by, and especially letting us see your video, which we will get to see on Discovery coming up in May or June.
May or June. I'm not sure the scheduling. It's episode 13, the Treasure Ship Baltic.
There you go. There's your plug-in for that, too. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Bill.
It's been a pleasure to have you aboard. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. I want to thank Benny and Tim for coming by and bringing some real treasures that aren't necessarily all gold. Back in a